You know what time it is.
What's up, beer people?
If you heard it on the hashtag Beer Town, it's true.
It must be true.
It's true. It is fact. Please, won't you name one of your beers cart horse?
And just do something terrible. Just brew shit beer.
Stick your finger in there every now and again.
Stir it with a sock.
Every show, it feels like my first show.
Every show is a new adventure.
Having some good conversation here, Mr. Troy.
Did I make sense there? I think I did.
I love them all.
We are fair.
Hello, beer fans, and welcome to another podcast of hashtag Beer Time. This is a special release, meaning that it wasn't recorded on the radio airwaves. It was a private interview that I managed to secure. My guest is the founder of Lagunitas Brewing Company in the United States. And it was an absolute pleasure to be able to have a few minutes of his time and to be able to chat to him about craft beer and really a whole bunch of other beer-related things. I asked him about his past and future involvements in the beer scene, things like his light bulb moments, how many he has. We talk about the term of, craft beer selling out. We speak about his ideal future of craft beer. And lastly, impressions of South Africa and where we're heading. Just letting you know that the recording was done at a hotel in the outside pool area, and what started off as a very nice, quiet morning turned into a very noisy afternoon with kids screaming. So bear with us and try and get through those last few questions. I managed to chat to him before and after the interview, and one of the things that really struck me was his honesty and his approach to beer in general. And one thing I realized is that no matter what your opinion is on craft beer and which company owns which brand, at the end of the day, you're not wrong. You all have very valid reasons or, I suppose, feelings towards what constitutes a successful brand. So there was one thing that really stood out for me, and, I really enjoyed chatting with this guy. And on that note, I hope you guys enjoy the interview. So please, let me know what you think. Cheers. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Cullinan Hotel in Cape Town, and I have the privilege and honor of talking to an American beer legend. His name is Tony McGee, and he is the CEO of Lagunitas. Mr. Tony, how are you doing?
Very good. That's saying a little too much. but the truth is I'm not actually CEO anymore.
Oh, really?
No, about before we actually made the Heineken relationship, I had hired a CEO.
Okay.
At one time I was CEO, CIO, CFO, CMO, and every time as the brewery got larger, I was able to hire someone who'd be better at that specific job than me.
Okay.
I would immediately replace myself and kick myself upstairs. So what I am now is chairman of the board, which means I really get to cherry pick projects that I want to be involved with.
That's pretty cool.
And and my CEO, actually, she's a woman named Maria Stipp. She came to us about now 2.5 years ago, and she ran Activision for a stretch. And if you ever played, Mortal Kombat, Modern Warfare was a game she developed with her team from a white paper.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
Very interesting person she is. And
must be a very interesting character to work with.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
she doesn't bring weapons.
No, I should hope not.
Office, but
I
had to ask her not to, actually.
That's actually, I've got a list of questions that I wanted to run past you, but you kind of brought in something that I was thinking about asking, and that is going from different positions. I mean, you obviously started as the founder, and now you are...
Well, I still am the founder.
You still are. Yeah.
I'm the same height as I was.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But that's, you still... It leads us into the first question in terms of your past and the future. Did you ever expect yourself to make it to got some urban sounds out there.
Yeah.
Did you ever expect yourself to make it through 3 generations of the brewing scene? I mean, you didn't think you'd be in the brewing scene, did you?
In the brand scene?
Just beer.
Well, I didn't. No, I didn't start out my life at all to be a brewer. In fact, I didn't even like drinking beer. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, where the beer was dismal back in the in the 70s and 80s when I first kind of started encountering beer. So the beer wasn't in the picture. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to write music. I studied composition in school. I wanted to write TV commercial music and eventually do movie scores.
Okay.
And I was good, and others are great. And the ones that are great were able to proceed with a career. I had to find something else to do. So I became a brewer. Really more by accident than anything else. You know?
Well, I think we're all very happy that you actually chose that.
Me too.
Decision or direction. What would you say to your younger 20-something year old self starting something like the brewery, or looking back now?
Well, I started the brewery in 93, so by that time I was 33-year-old self.
Okay.
And I'd been through, kind of an aspiration and time working as a musician. And then following that, I was seriously unemployed, sleeping on my mom's couch for 4 or 5 years. And,
Nothing wrong with that?
Yeah, well, maybe. Hell depends, But if you're the couch, it's not so good, And then after that, I moved to California from Chicago and began selling commercial printing, which is kind of an odd, invisible career, But I did well in that, but I disliked it. And at one point, I married the woman that I'd known for 10 years before that. And marriage was different than dating, and so I wasn't sure that was going to work out. And so I just decided I had to find something else to do with my life. And in the end, it did work out. My wife ends up running a big part of the brewery for a long time. But my little brother in 1992 got me a home brewing kit for Christmas.
Okay.
And I brewed it in January. I drank it in February, and by 5 minutes after drinking that beer, I was determined to open a small brewery. Figured if I rented that space and things didn't work out at home, I could live in that space. I wouldn't have to sell printing. I'd
sleep on the malts.
I would. I'd make the beer. I'd sell it. Keep what money was left over and live off that and restart life. It was really more of a seizure than it was aspiration or a career choice. Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect kind of segue into starting into the next question. It's based on a question that I've asked a few people in my interviews that I've done, and that's a light bulb moment. I like to say that it can be a home brewer, it can be anyone in the beer scene, in the craft beer scene. It comes from, for example, for me when I first tasted my homebrew beer, the little light bulb went off in my head and just said, wow, this is actually pretty tasty and drinkable. I was very surprised that I could drink my beer. Did you have a light bulb moment, or did you have a few light bulb moments in your beer career?
Oh, there are dozens of them, what you said, you brewed your homebrew and you watched it ferment and you cared for it, nurtured it, kept it safe, and then you decanted it. I drank it right out of the fermenter, right? You couldn't wait for it to condition.
Yeah.
Well, so coming up as a musician, there's a time, if you're writing music where you sit down with a piece of paper and you do your work and you're listening, you're thinking, you're trying to hear what it is that you hope will happen. You try to find a way to describe it onto a page, and then you hand it to a group of musicians who will then perform it back for you. Well, this is exactly the same thing as creating that recipe, an idea of what you want for color and bitterness and mash temperatures and style and yeast choices. And once all those choices are made and put on paper, then you apply that to the process of and this is the same as musicians performing off the page. This is what brewers do. And they manifest this two-dimensional on paper idea into a three-dimensional sensory experience. It's the same thing with beer. Yeah. So I had that moment that you're talking about lots of times when something would get performed, and you'd actually hear this thing manifested in reality. And like a beer, you take it in purely through your senses. It's and it exists only in time, and only in the moment when that glass is to your lips and the beer spreads across your palate. And you inhale, and at the same time you swallow. This is like hearing music. It comes in through your ear, goes into your brain, and makes it do tricks.
It is something rewarding about making your own beer.
It's a wonderful moment. So
because you still never know. It's science. There's a lot of science that has to happen.
There's a lot of nature that has to happen.
Exactly. What's that saying? It's the brewer doesn't actually make the beer. It's nature and the yeast that does the trick. So there's a lot of uncertainty, especially with me and my homebrew. There's a lot of uncertainty into how that beer is going to taste. So that is every moment, every time you have that beer. That's
well, this is the creative process incarnate. You don't grow a tomato. You might have a garden. You might plant a tomato plant, you might
Sure.
fertilize it. You don't grow it. You create the circumstances where a tomato might occur.
Yes.
And if you're lucky, everything happens. You end up with a tomato. It has
You could get carrots. You never know.
you get it exactly. So the same thing is true for music. Same thing is true for beer. It's this natural process manifesting itself. Beer was making itself long before people decided to be its steward. It was just happening in little puddles here and there on Earth. There'd be wild yeast in the air. The sun warms the water. There's some grains that maybe were sitting in that warm water after a rain. And something ferments, and along come the birds and the squirrels and stuff, and they get hammered on it.
I'm in the middle of a little segue here, which we love doing on hashtag Beer Time. I'm fascinated at the moment with 17th century history, particularly the American Revolution and the discovery of...
Don't bring up the war.
Southern Africa. In my research and reading, they speak of ales and beers. I'm fascinated to think about what constituted a beer back in that day. A puddle of just fermented water, or it's.
Well, I think good beer was always good beer, and some people, whether they understood the biology that was being kind of the processes that were being undergone, if they understood sanitation, and who knows? But it's like they would know that if they cleaned things well, if they applied hot water, it was sanitized, if they handled it, washed their hands, and these might have just been rituals. It didn't matter. This was part of the dance of creating beer. Then there were probably people who were more careless and they made shitty beer.
Yes.
And so the houses that made wonderful beer were well respected, and the ones that didn't were consumed anyway, because beer, like we were saying earlier, is like sex. When it's great, it's good, and when it's bad, it's still just fine. And so
you'll drink it, yeah.
So I'm sure that the full spectrum of beer existed. There's a song in Sumer that was it was found in a dig in Iraq.
Okay,
And the song describes the process of making beer, and at the end of it, what they did was they had a big urn that they would fill with water and the drain, and things would happen and yeast. And when at the end of the song, everyone takes a straw and they push it through the muck on the top, which is the yeast rising and the proteins all coagulating, and you just drank from the middle of it. And the middle of it
communal
was always
share.
Yeah, and it unleashed. The song says it would unleash the power of the Tigris and Euphrates and every man. And so the point was the ingestion of alcohol and this community event that would occur where people did that. So, beer and human beings, fermented beverages, but beer, I think in particular, we evolved together. Three things that people would take into their bodies, sight unseen, with the hope that it'll go into their blood, to their brain, and then make it do tricks.
It certainly does do tricks.
There's something sacred about it.
We had a few beers last night, and
that's right.
I was doing a few tricks.
I got pictures of it.
As long as they don't make their way onto social media, I'm fine. I'm obviously talking about the Jack Black evening that we had last night, and Ross from Jack Black asked you a few questions. Something which we touched on even before this interview was the definition of craft beer, and I'm interested in obviously the psyche behind the way people think, and I want to know from you why you think there are certain perceptions from public groups that once a craft brewery sells to an international brewery, why they either sell out or should no longer be supported. Why do you think beer gets such a bad rap?
Well, it's human nature. I think, as we were talking earlier too, it's easy to see things, see life as a zero-sum game, that there's a fixed reservoir of opportunity in life. And if something is winning, something else is losing. And that's rarely the case. And the truth of the matter is, it's just not the case in beer, particularly in craft beer. In the world of industrial lager, if ABI grows, it might be that Heineken loses. If Heineken, in the old days, there would be two breweries in town. The market wasn't growing at all. It was a tug of war over share, and share was fixed. But in craft brewing, the base of business is growing as more people become aware of it, and it continues to grow. And so, it's like, I often had this picture in my mind of, like, in the United States, there was a lot of competition between breweries, craft breweries. It was unnecessary, and but there was a distraction ultimately from what mattered most, which was growing the category. And, if you had a balloon and you had two warriors standing on the surface of that balloon facing each other, and the balloon's expanding, these two warriors look at each other and decide, I'm going to freaking kill you. And they rush towards each other with their weapons drawn, determined to draw blood. But the balloon's expanding, and they run as fast as they can and expend all their energy, and they never get any closer to each other. Yeah. Because the surface area between them is expanding. And so it's all kind of wasted energy having any kind of dark vision. Everything that involves better beer contributes to the promotion of this thing that we all entered into the business to do in the first place. And I don't think there's anybody. I think somebody who's small might think that small is great because that's what they are today. But, I think everybody would like to drive a nicer car. I think everyone would like to have a nicer vacation and ultimately retire someday. And so, which means scale is going to be necessary, if not desirable. It's necessary because your costs continue to increase. Malt doesn't become less expensive every year. Hops don't become less expensive, or freight doesn't become less expensive. Things need to grow. Darwin's not nostalgic, and things are either growing or dying. And some things happen on a very, we can have a couple guys, chipping away at a rock, with a pick, looking for minerals, and they're each working exactly the same hardness, applying the same effort to it. One of them comes across a much richer vein. There's not merit, that's just chance. I don't think that Steve Jobs worked any harder than I did in my business. He just happened to be working one of the richest veins in history, and that's all there is to say about it. The thing is doing the work, and if you do the work, good things happen.
I liked last night you told us that it was your brother-in-law, someone who actually came up with the definition of craft.
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? The word was born yesterday. This word craft got applied to beer in the U.S., I don't know, 16, maybe.
It's such an emotional attachment from what I've seen with the smaller brewers or just any craft brewers in South Africa. There's just such an emotional connection with that word craft.
Yes.
And who should be called craft? And it's amazing how it's just a word.
Yeah. Well, this shirt I'm wearing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I said this last night or not. This is a Tommy Bahama shirt. Okay. And when I took it off the hanger, there was a tag on the back here that said "Island Crafted."
Nice.
And then I looked a little further. I found out it's the island of China, which I had no idea was that pesky Asian land bridge. So the words, the meaning of the word craft has been misconstrued and drawn into spaces that
it's also been abused. I think from the other side. So
It's like a word organic. At one time it actually meant something when farmers were trying to use it. Sure. The next thing you know, Nestle is using the word organic.
Exactly.
And is it? I don't know.
Packaged organic. Well, that's a nice segue into terms of the next question. It was around the future of craft beer. You had a lovely analogy last night where you said every year there's a whole new group of legal drinking people, 18-year-olds, 21 in America. It actually might change in South Africa to 21 in the next few months. But what are your predictions in the beer markets? And please reiterate what you said last night and what you expect to happen, and then maybe you can branch off and just give us your idealistic or maybe romantic future that you want from beer.
Yeah. Well, about this rolling tide of new potential customers as they turn legal drinking age, they have a continuously changing fundamental perspective than the generation before them did. I mean,
what is beer?
Yeah. I mean, when I so me, I guess I'm old now. I'll be 58 this year, But when we started brewing, to me, the day before I started brewing, beer was Budweiser, Miller, and Coors, and Heineken, and Corona, and these sort of, they're all interesting brands, and they all have stories of their own, but they're fairly undifferentiated lager. There's
a massive correlation between beer and lager. That's when people think of beer, they think of lager.
Well, because of just the way things worked and evolutionary process, and Darwin at work in beer, lager won, just like humans won over baboons. So that there's no merit or there's no virtue to it. It's just how it worked out, and yet then when I started, and I encountered Anchor Steam, my first experience with craft beer, my perception was changed, but that was a changed perception, not a fundamental perception. The young people turning 18 years old now and 21 in the U.S., they look at the world, they see craft as the sexy thing. That's their fundamental perception of beer.
Exactly.
And they don't. Their changed perceptions will occur over time, but that's where they begin. And so as these generations move into the space and become the dominant consumer kind of the things that we make for a living, what we do becomes central. And after a while, we become ordinary. Yeah. And that ordinariness is an enormous conquest. In the same way that you said that at one time lager, was considered just beer. Yeah. The people that are younger than you and I, Jack Black's, is just beer.
Yeah. It is a completely mind shift or just generation thing. It's completely different in 10 years' time.
And so the genie's out of the bottle, and it'll never go back in the bottle. And craft beer will eventually evolve to become the SAPs and the APIs of the future. And is that a bad thing? It's just how history will turn. And as the people who are today craft become larger and become the firmament, down the road, they become the establishment. Well, the anti-establishment, the nouveau thing will appear again, and niche differentiation will occur underneath us, and eventually disrupt us.
Something else will come. Yeah, exactly.
And it's
sort of a continuous thing.
It's like a ferment. You always have all this convection in the tank of things rising to the surface and becoming part of the foam, and other things settling to the bottom and dying. A fermenter is a great. It's not even a metaphor. It's for reality. It is reality, and we're all part of a large fermentation in which we are the new expression of beer. I think it's a crazy thing to recognize your place in history that way and sort of be okay with it. So then as you evolve, well, a couple things happen. The founder becomes an older person. When I was 33 and brewing, my life was my life was longer than my memories. Now at 58, I can say pretty much my memories are longer than the potential life. And so what am I going to do with my business? Because I have all of these people that work for me who've put their chips down on the table right alongside mine. Yeah. They made bets. Yeah. Then after they made their bet, then they went and they got married and they had children and they borrowed money to buy a house and now they're saving for their children's college and. Yeah. Well, as I'm getting old, I have friends my age who just woke up dead one morning. It's like life is uncertain, and tomorrow is promised to nobody. So I felt like it was important because I don't have children. So I felt it was important to secure the future of all these people that had trusted me. So now, does that mean that I get money? Well, yes. Because equity is worth something, and so is money is worth something. So. What in our case, what Heineken desired was the shares of stock in Lagunitas, and they were willing to trade something they had a surplus of, and that was money. And this is it's a complete,
which is actually nothing wrong with that,
right? It's a trading of equal values. Yeah. It's not like, well, here I'm going to dump the brewery on them, and I'm going to take the money and run. Having said all that, I'm employed now not by Lagunitas. I'm not employed by Heineken. But I remain very involved in Lagunitas, and I'm sort of within Heineken's larger structure, which is enormously complex. I'm Lagunitas' guardian angel. Yeah. So I see to it that the things that Heineken invested in Lagunitas are preserved. Sure. The larger company, Gulliver, occasionally rolled over, I'm sure, and crushed a few Lilliputians, and he might have felt bad about it, but there were lots more Lilliputians where those came from. So it's not the worst thing.
Interesting analogy, yeah.
Well, do you feel terrible if you accidentally stepped on an anthill and crushed 50 ants? You go, oh gosh, maybe you step away from it. Yeah. But it's not like so. I look after the Lilliputian, Lagunitas, within the Gulliver of Heineken. And so I still have a very important role in things. In fact, I'm here today in Cape Town for exactly that reason. It's actually...
You've got a bit of a whirlwind tour, I understand.
Yeah. But you got to remember, too, now it's like, now that I have my retirement set, before we did this, my wife and I had not nearly enough money to retire. Not nearly enough. And so now we do. now I come back to work for sport because I believe in it and I love it. Now, there's I'm not needy anymore. I can come here and I can contribute value without having a dog in the fight, so to speak, except the idea that I want the legacy to succeed and to be spoken of well in the future. So it just, the business, Lagunitas and any brewery, this is true, is never the same company from year to year.
Yeah.
So the idea that, it changed is crazy because it never didn't change. It always had to change, and because that's how Darwin evolves and matures a business into its own destiny. And its destiny might be a dead end, or its destiny might be to have progeny. And I think Lagunitas will have progeny now. It's a great thing.
I appreciate you telling me that and answering that. I think also it's getting a bit noisy here. The kids are being introduced into the pool area, so
and they're all underage too. So
exactly,
they can't share in our conversation legally.
No, they're not allowed to listen. So I also want to be mindful of your time.
We've got a pause or something. We can relocate.
It's fine. We've got kind of one more question, and it's a nice little segue, and it's simply what are your impressions of South Africa? You've been here for a few days. How does it compare to the US market? And is anything missing in South Africa compared to the USA? And what is maybe an advantage? Could you maybe pinpoint something that you've seen in South Africa that we could use to our advantage?
When you go from there's a lot of levels to the game of beer, because beer is one of those things that's regulated in every country, and that regulation sometimes shapes the behavior of the participants, the players that operate in those markets. It's a good thing that beer is regulated, but so every country you go to, you find a little different set of patterns. But the one thing that's universally the same in my experience is how humans interact with beer, how humans interact with new beer, how brewers look to those beer lovers for to understand their preferences. They can respond to them effectively and then create a mutually beneficial economic and supply relationship. Everything about craft brewing. Everything about craft brewing is totally crowdsourced. Yeah. Brewers sometimes have a perfect vision of what beer might be, but mostly they learn from how beer lovers respond to the things that they do. Yeah. And when consumers respond positively, the brewer does more of it. If they respond negatively, the brewer looks for other ideas. I see that everywhere as true. And so South Africa, what I've noticed here in Cape Town, it feels to me like the way the U.S. beer market was when we began in 1993. Sure. I'm not saying that Cape Town is behind. It's not that way. It's just starting.
Well, it is an open, known, not fact, but a known thing that, we...
But the whole rest of the world
we are a little bit behind. Yeah. In some things we are, maybe 20 years behind the States, but in some other things we're maybe only a few years behind, like 2 years behind. So, yeah.
Yeah. But here's the thing is that I truly believe that the craft beer could only really have been born in the United States. And it has something to do with the structure of our market. Yeah. We have what's called a 3-tier system, where we have brewers, which produce the supply. We have distributors, the middle tier, which move the product to market, and then we have retailers. And this 3-tier structure is by statute, and it's very cross ownership between the tiers. Historically, was verboten. It's becoming a little blurred now because things change and it's evolution again. But the truth is that 3-tier system, which provided an independent distribution tier and an independent retail tier. Like brewers can't lend money to retailers. Okay. Brewers can't give equipment to retailers. Distributors can't either. So what you have is these 3 tiers that are all fighting over the available margin. Retailers try to upstream cost of distributors. Brewers try to downstream cost of distributors. It's everybody's scrambling, and at different times, different tiers have advantages. But what this 3-tier system provided was a truly competitive market, and with the distribution tier being the crucible where only good ideas really survived. The distributor pursues his economic interest, so he wants more beer that sells well, so he can give something to the retailers. The retailers want distributors who will provide service and opportunity to what is trending
to their business.
Yeah, and so because of this crucible of these 3 tiers, craft brewing could, from a seed, grow into a fully formed plant. And whereas in the rest of the world, often distributors and brewers are one entity, and retailers are kind of at the the whip end of the tail, and they react, but ultimately they can only sell what they get, and the brewers only allow distribution to so it takes there's always cracks and crevices in there. And so craft could grow somewhat, but it was always harder in the rest of the world. In the United States, it came into full flower because of this accident of the 3-tier distribution. Now, social media then carried the news of this revolution to the rest of the world, and everybody else got excited about the possibility of doing that. And so the little crevices in in those systems in countries that were more constrained, they just took an axe to it. They found their way through it. 2 retailers found their way through it, 2 consumers, and now they're opening it up wider and wider. And I think with the relationship between Heineken and Jack Black and Soweto Brewery and Stellenbrau, the big brewers are signing on. They're going, oh my gosh, this is important. And so they created this very unique, this is truly unique, even with Heineken, CSB as a vehicle that will act more like distributors did in the United States and be a crucible where brewers can perfect their craft, learn, crowdsource their ideas from, through the transparency of the distribution tier and understand what retailers and consumers are hoping for. So it's to me, that's a very exciting development.
That's very interesting.
But it's the rock opening up, The rock was a wall that prevented the change. And so that's why this is like 1993. The walls come down.
Often, exactly. Yeah. Rest in peace. What I was thinking now, like Cape Town, in my days of trade, it was really the wild west. There's just no rules, no walls or anything like that.
It's a bad thing.
No, but it was just a wild west, and now it's. I feel that when I left, I felt like cool. There's a bit more structure, but I haven't just heard what you just said. It feels like maybe we are still in the wild west, or just with the introduction of I think you said CSB.
Yeah, well, that's what they call that. Yeah, that's the distribution.
And that's what does it stand for?
I don't know. Craft specialty
spirits,
something. Yeah,
spirits beverages.
I don't know.
It sounds like they are trying to then put a little bit more. Stability, if that's a word, because
I think the word is access.
Access,
they want to offer these brewers better access to retail, and that's that transparency. So now the brewers can be more in touch with retailers, more in touch with consumers, without the sort of this opacity. It's like at another time I might have gone to Heineken South Africa. So before we had a relationship with, would you carry our beer here? And they go, no, we don't want, because we already are selling the beers that we want to sell. Sure. We don't need extra things.
Yeah.
But the distribution saying that they don't need extra things is not the same as a consumer saying, I don't want any different beers. Consumers could be saying, gosh, I'd love to have something different, but they would never know that there were these other things on the other side of the wall hoping to get their attention. So it's
why? Yeah.
I mean, it's and this 3-tier system in the U.S. is one of these accidents of the structure following Prohibition. Because pre-Prohibition in the United States, brewers controlled retailers. And the decision was made that we don't want that anymore. What we want is a more fluid market.
You bring up a very interesting point in terms of where South Africa is in terms of maybe maybe we're heading to a prohibition kind of states or control. But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast and discussion.
The nanny state never sleeps.
Yeah.
It's always there wanting to tell you what's good for you or not.
Exactly. Mr. Tony, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time, for having a quick, sneaky little midday beer with me. I thank you again for visiting Cape Town and for bringing us some delicious beer. Thank you very much.
It's so cool to be part of this world here. I mean, I'm 14,000 miles from home. It's very cool. It's very cool. It's an honor to be for you even to be interested in what I might have to offer. So, thanks.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and to everyone listening, thank you for listening. Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for listening, guys and girls. Make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just search for #BeerTime. That's #BeerTime written out in full. Hope you enjoyed the show, and check you next time. Cheers.